Good afternoon. So I want to talk to you guys about New Maryland. This is kind of a follow-up from the video I did yesterday about Liberia. And I'm just learning about New Maryland. And so I wanted to share this information with you guys because I was talking to someone else who is a Black Indigenous man. And he didn't know anything about it. So what better thing to do than to share it with you all too. Let's go. So New Maryland was America's state-run colonization experiment that failed. You know, most people have already heard about Liberia, and there's very few that I'm guessing have known about New Maryland, which is the U.S. state-ran colony. The project was called New Maryland. It was later known as the Republic of Maryland. And it happened because in the early 1830s, the state of Maryland was grappling with what they called a problem, which was a growing population of free so-called Black Indigenous people. Lawmakers feared that these people threatened slavery and challenged white supremacy and destabilized racial order. And their solution was not to grant rights or integrate, it was to remove these people. And to carry this out, Maryland created the Maryland State Colonization Society, which was a state-level shoot-off of the American Colonization Society. Unlike Liberia, which was run nationally, Maryland wanted full control over its own removal project. So beginning in 1834, free and formerly enslaved so-called Black Indigenous Americans from Maryland were transported to the west coast of Africa near Cape Palmas. Now, this land was already occupied by African indigenous nations, particularly the Grabo people. The settlement was called Maryland in Africa, and from the beginning, the project struggled. Settlers arrived to harsh conditions, unfamiliar climate, inadequate housing, limited supplies, and widespread disease. Malaria, yellow fever, and dysentery killed many of them within the first few months. And support from Maryland was inconsistent and often motivated more by politics than human survival. But the thing was, the disease was not the core problem. There was a deeper issue of legitimacy. There was no indigenous consent from the locals. Local African nations were excluded from governance and denied political power. And Western land ownership systems, American laws, and Christianity were imposed on these indigenous lands. This was not return, it was colonial settlement carried out by people who had themselves been displaced. So for 20 years, Maryland in Africa functioned as a fragile colonial outpost. Even the Black settlers, so-called Black Indigenous settlers, had limited autonomy. Real authority rested with officials tied to Maryland's own interest. The colony existed to solve Maryland's racial anxiety, not to build a sustainable society. So by the early 1850s, the project was unraveling. It was expensive, it was unpopular, and Maryland no longer wanted to fund it. In 1854, the state withdrew direct control. The settlement declared independence and renamed itself the Republic of Maryland. But this independence was largely symbolic. The new republic had a very small population, no stable economy, no strong military, and ongoing hostilities with surrounding indigenous nations. Within 3 years, open conflict broke out between the Republic of Maryland and the Grabo people. The Republic could not defend itself. There was no longer a U.S. state backing, and the federal government had no interest in intervening. So in 1857, the experiment collapsed. The Republic of Maryland ceased to exist and was absorbed into Liberia simply to survive. So why did Maryland fail, or New Maryland fail? Because it was built on the same fatal foundation as every colonization scheme. It was designed to remove people, not empower them. It imposed foreign systems on indigenous land. It relied on outside power instead of local legitimacy. And it treated human lives as tools of racial policy. Once the power behind it withdrew, the project had nothing left to stand on. New Maryland matters because it exposes the truth behind Back to Africa narratives. This was not a Black-led liberation movement. It was a white-controlled strategy to manage race inside the United States by exporting people elsewhere. The failure of New Maryland proves something history keeps showing us. Exile was never freedom. In colonization, no matter who is used to carry out, cannot succeed without consent, justice, and sovereignty. So, there you have it. New Maryland. You guys have a great day.